Obviously, these children are incredibly sick and often do need specialized food, but it is a war zone, and so sometimes that specialized treatment can be.
I mean, what do you you know, I'm not trying to justify the starvation of the kids with pre-existing conditions. You know, I'm not trying to get on the side of that, but war is complicated. I am going to do a little shoot the messenger here, because these clips are independent of the person who's been sharing them. I've noticed that there's like this @InfoLibNews in the corner of both of them. I think this is a guy who works for Zero Hedge. Zero Hedge is absolute trash, so ignore the source, but just the clips themselves are from a completely independent event to the source itself. This is the speechwriter for Obama, Sarah Hurwitz, speaking, and what she says is pretty astonishing.
There have been huge shifts in America on how people think about Jews and Israel, and I think that is especially true of young people. So we are now wrestling with a new, I think, generational divide here. And I think that's particularly true in that social media is now our source of media. And this, you know, it used to be that the media you got in America was American media, and it was pretty mainstream. You know, it generally didn't express extreme anti-Israel views. You had to go to a pretty weird bookstore to find global media and fringe media. But today, we have social media, which is a global medium, right? It is shaped, its algorithms are shaped by billions of people worldwide who don't really love Jews. And so while in the 1990s, you know, a young person probably wasn't going to find Al Jazeera or someone like Nick Fuentes, today, those media outlets find them. They find them on their phones. It's also this increasingly post-literate media, less and less text, more and more videos. So you have TikTok just smashing our young people's brains all day long with video of carnage in Gaza. And this is why so many of us can't have a sane conversation with younger Jews, because anything that we try to say to them, they are hearing it through this wall of carnage. So I want to give data and information and facts and arguments, and they are just seeing in their minds carnage, and I sound obscene. And, you know, I think, unfortunately, the very smart, I think, bet that we made on Holocaust education to serve as anti-Semitism education, in this new media environment, I think that is beginning to break down a little bit. Because, you know, Holocaust education is absolutely essential, but I think it may be confusing some of our young people about anti-Semitism because they learn about big, strong Nazis hurting weak, emaciated Jews. And they think, oh, anti-Semitism is like anti-black racism, right? Powerful white people against powerless black people. So when on TikTok all day long they see powerful Israelis hurting weak, skinny Palestinians, it's not surprising that they think, oh, I know, the lesson of the Holocaust is you fight Israel. You fight the big, powerful people.
Isn't that wild? Like, I couldn't believe she was saying it all out loud. I agree completely with the idea that, yes, Holocaust education is important. You know, education on fascism, on dictatorships, on genocides, on you know, the brutality that was enacted upon not only Jewish people but Roma people, LGBTQ plus people under the Nazis regime. That should be taught. Absolutely, that should be taught. But then to not recognize what you're saying out loud right afterwards, in that, in the current moment, in this moment in history, right now, it is the Israelis who are enacting a genocide upon Palestinians, and kids are smart. They're like, sometimes I think they're a lot smarter than people give them credit for. And yes, they have way more access to social media than any generation before them, if you're talking about Gen Z, right? And they have been seeing, as she said, the carnage. They've been seeing with their own eyes what the genocide looks like. And they're, I would say, justifiably disgusted by it. And that's one of the reasons why they're opposing this. Like, it's supposed to be something universally that we oppose no matter where it takes place at any moment in history. It doesn't matter who is doing it to whom, which group is doing it to another group, and they're putting two and two together. She's saying this is one of the dangers of having so much education about the Holocaust, is that they're recognizing that genocide is bad, so that if Israel wants to commit a genocide, suddenly they're anti-Israel, because we taught them that things like the Holocaust is a bad thing, and that if Israel wants to commit a Holocaust, say, on Palestinians, then they're siding with the Palestinians. Like, to me, it's just such a wild thing to hear said out loud. And I know that's obviously not the point, right? The point is that she wants to be able to have a nuanced conversation, especially with younger generations about, maybe you don't know the both sides of the story. All you have done is seen all these horrifying war crimes and dead kids and schools and churches and mosques being bombed and children's hospitals being bombed and orphanages getting slaughtered. And when you see all that, it makes you sad, and then you're unwilling to actually listen when I want to tell you about the bad things that Hamas does too. So we can't actually just have a discussion about this because you're just, again, too saturated with all the carnage. And then it's like, well, again, people seeing it with their own eyes are coming to their own conclusions that this is the worst of humanity. This is horrifying. I can't believe it. We taught our kids morals, and they're being moral. is basically the takeaway from all this, which is, again, such a almost infuriating thing to hear said out loud without a hint of irony. They also applauded Olivia Reingold, a staff writer at Barry Weiss's Free Press, for her reporting revealing that some of the children Israel was starving to death and denying medical aid in Gaza had pre-existing conditions. I'm sure you remember that segment. She's also the same person who did that just unbelievably cringe attempted takedown of John Oliver.
This is a story that I think if I were to die today would be included in my obituary. There was so much controversy over it, but no one has disputed the facts, which were that in 12 out of 12 instances of photos that were alleged to show starvation and famine in Gaza, we actually found that these children had really complicated medical histories.
Which, again, is just such a fucked up thing to say out loud with pride, with confidence. Kids with other conditions also don't deserve to be starved to death. It's been the gotcha here is so grotesque. To be able to be like, well, I know you saw the pictures of the emaciated child skeletons. You got really sad when you saw them. But just so you know, some of those photos, those kids had pre-existing conditions, right? They still deserve food and to live. I don't like, I'm not suddenly, they had pre-existing conditions, so they deserve to be starved to death. No. But just like if it made you sad, right? You weren't probably getting sad because just of the starvation. You were probably sad because, they looked a little different because of the conditions they had. Right. I still don't think they should be starved to death, though. That was always the point. It doesn't matter if they have pre-existing conditions. And, at this point, we've seen so many different versions of kids starving to death that there's an ample amount of evidence of children having starved to death who did also not have pre-existing conditions. What a horrifying thing. She just said out loud that she has so much pride in this. This is one of the stories that I hope I'm remembered for.
Just the first 12 examples that we looked into that were circulating online. And I got this idea because when I started reading this coverage, this was this past August, I started to notice that the same children were being photographed over and over again. And they were often photographed by different photographers, which to me suggested a level of coordination. Obviously, these children are incredibly sick and often do need specialized food, but it is a war zone, and so sometimes that specialized treatment can be.
I mean, what do you I'm not trying to justify the starvation of the kids with pre-existing conditions. I'm not trying to get on the side of that, but war is complicated. Yeah, I'm sure you've heard the saying, war is hell. And in this case, yeah. Which, again, beyond the fact that this is the most grotesque thing that you could possibly imagine to defend, right? Every single person who understands this topic, and I'm not a nutrition expert, I'm also not a child starvation expert, so I had to defer to reading articles by people who weren't, just unbelievable monsters, who were talking about the fact that when there is a crisis, when there is a mass starvation event, it is usually people, children specifically, with pre-existing conditions that die first from these horrifying events. Then it's healthy children. Then it's adults with pre-existing conditions. Then it's healthy adults. Like it goes in the order of that affair. And to say that when there are photos of some of the first victims of this man-made mass starvation event, and then to say, well, I mean, they're lying. You don't know the full story. Well, are those pictures of starving children? Yes, but that some of them have other conditions as well. Okay, right. They still deserve to eat, though. Jesus. It just like it's a level of evil that just goes beyond words. Like, you know, I don't even know if name calling is appropriate.
Another bombshell report just dropped exposing Canada's complicity in Israel's genocide in Gaza. The new report from the Palestinian Youth Movement, Arms Embargo Now, World Beyond War, and CJPME found hundreds of shipments from Canadian military manufacturers to the U.S. weapons factories that manufacture Israel's warplanes, bombs, and artillery shells. On top of that, it exposed how Canada has been serving as a, quote, vital transit corridor for hundreds of shipments of European-made explosive TNT en route to U.S. bomb makers. Oh, and from August 2024 to August 2025, immediately after receiving hundreds of matching shipments from Canadian manufacturers, American Lockheed factories sent 34 shipments of military aircraft components to the Israeli Ministry of Defense, the Israeli Air Force Base, and Israeli weapons manufacturers. All of this happened despite promises from Canadian officials, like Melanie Joly, our former foreign affairs minister, who pledged that Canada would, quote, not have any form of arms or parts of arms be sent to Gaza, period. She also added at the time that, quote, how they're being sent and where they're being sent is irrelevant. Meanwhile, current foreign affairs minister Anita Anand has said, quote, we will not allow Canadian-made weapons to fuel this conflict in any way. But this new report lays out what they call a, quote, regulatory loophole that exempts most US-bound military goods from requiring permits, meaning that the vast majority of this weapons pipeline operates in a deliberate black hole, hidden from public scrutiny, government tracking, and human rights assessments. I reached out to Foreign Affairs Minister Anita Anand's office, and they shoved my request over to Global Affairs Canada, who, as you can see by my increasingly desperate follow-ups here, did not get back to me in time for this video. But Global Affairs Canada did manage to scrounge up a statement for CBC, who they told that the department, quote, has not approved any new permits for items to Israel that could be used in the current conflict in Gaza since January 8th, 2024. But if there was no permit required for these exports in the first place, as the report suggests, then this statement doesn't address the reality of a regulatory black hole that is indeed seeing Canadian weapons parts eventually head to Israel. Anyway, the group behind this report is calling for a full, comprehensive two-way arms embargo on Israel. And they're calling on the federal government to support NDP MP Jenny Kwan's private member bill C-233, which aims to close these loopholes that are making us even more complicit in this genocide. That bill is up for second reading in the House of Commons tomorrow and will be voted on in February, so keep an eye on that. Meanwhile, the UN Security Council just backed Trump's ceasefire plan for Gaza, one that has seen critics raise several concerns about its impact on Palestinians' right to self-determination. And that comes as Israel continues to abuse civilians in Palestine. Just today, they shot and injured an Al Jazeera cameraman covering a protest in the occupied West Bank. And families in Gaza are still struggling to feed their children. And what's Canada doing all the while? Interrogating a former UN Special Rapporteur who investigated Israeli abuses against.
Oh yeah, that happened. I think for over 4 hours. 4 hours detained and questioned, the UN rapporteur, because of his positions on Israel. Meanwhile, there was an IDF soldier that just went to university in Toronto and actually physically assaulted a bunch of women, students, and was allowed to do that and then leave the country and go right back to, I'm assuming, keep committing war crimes. Lance, you gotta check this out. On January 6th, I got punched in the face. Oh, no way. No, I missed it. This guy, oh, this is the dude who I've seen all over the right. They're so proud of this man. There's so many videos where he's like apparently giving some speech at like, you know, a Michigan town hall. And it's really wild the things that he's saying there. It's one of those things where like whenever you see a Christian supremacist and they're talking about Muslims, they love suddenly becoming overnight feminists. Suddenly they'll talk about like, they take away women's rights. They force them to dress a certain way. They are oppressive to women. And then it's like, what are your views on feminism, sir? Yeah, I'd like to know. I'm just curious. What do you think in terms of should women have autonomy and rights? Are you on the? I mean, I think you'd find you have a lot more in common with other religious fundamentalists.
I'm a traitor! I'm a traitor!
love how it's just looped, endlessly looped. As you know, and as the Twitch platform I'm sure is watching right now, I don't condone any forms of physical violence. Would never do such things.
Thank you so much to our patrons for making this show possible. We could not fund it without you. And if you want to join, please check out patreon.com/theserfs to unlock bonus episodes, uncensored content, and all the good stuff. Thanks to Anna Loves Riley, Addercap, Bobby Lasers, Cheryl Alvarez, Comrade Junkie, Doug Caddy, Everything Important, Hegbard Salim, Multimondi, Omni, Political Papi, Preston Kroll, Quiet One 85, Riley and Anna, Roller Dragon, Cernicus, Stellar Gwyn, Sebastian Demmel, Tigwick, and Words Greenwood.